read your thoughts. From the future.
The movies of 1985.
Hello, and welcome to week 19 of the year 1985. That's Tuesday the 7th of May to Monday the 13th of May. My name is Jason Hutchins, and I am trapped in the year 1985. So what I do to while away the hours is I spin a bingo machine to select a random number that tells me which movie I should rent from a video store in Perth, Western Australia. And then I watch that movie and give my comments and share a bit of news from the year 1985 as well. So it's a pastime, what can I say? So, without further ado, let's spin the bingo machine and see which movie I'll be watching this week. And the number is out. It is number 13, the lucky number 13. Now, what I'm just going to have to do is press play on tape on my Commodore 64 to load up my little spreadsheet of movies. And it turns out that number 13 is a movie called Angel's Egg. So Angel's Egg is a Japanese anime movie from the year 1985. I've never seen it before. It's quite a short one, just 75 minutes long. Now, in the year 2025, I don't think you can get this movie from anywhere. You might need to have a search on the Internet Archive and see if there's a torrent available, whatever that is. But in the year 1985, I know that there's a specialist video store over in Dalkeith called Switched On Video that will probably have this one. So I'm just going to swim across the river and go and grab that now. While I'm doing that, let me switch on the TV and you can watch a commercial while I'm gone.
Mouths are made for kissing, smiling, reminiscing. Mouths are made for comments. Can't you feel it in your soul? 'Cause nothing's quite so cool and round as a cool mint. And you can't put a square mint in a round hole.
Allen's Cool Mints. Delicious, chewy, luscious peppermint nougat.
Nothing's quite so cool.
Okay, I'm back.
And round as a cool mint.
Let's pop this one in.
A great chew from Who.
And I'll just pause it before the movie begins. So, yeah, I'm amazed they had that video cassette over on the other side of the river in Dalkeith. Quite impressed with that. So, just looking at the video, the cover of the video cassette, it's a very black cover. And on the front, it says Tenshi no Tamago, which is Angel's Egg. There's a picture of a white-haired girl looking very sad and bleak. And at the bottom it says an animated feature film by Mamoru Oshii and, not Oishi, Oshii probably. Doesn't Oishi mean delicious? And Yoshitaka Amano. And just turning over to the back, we have, so it's on VHS and everything. So there's a large image of the girl, and it looks like she's bowing down before a prince receiving an egg. I'm not sure exactly what's going on. But there's a blurb that says, from the creators who brought you Ghost in the Shell and Vampire Hunter D comes a post-apocalyptic fairy tale. A young girl carrying a large egg wanders about a surreal, nightmarish world, collecting water in glass jars. A man with a cross soon appears and begins to observe her daily routine. Despite her worries for the safety of her egg, she grows to trust him, although his intentions remain mysterious. So it's a Studio Dean production from 1985, Japanese dialogue with English subtitles. Like I said, you might have trouble tracking that down in the year 2025, but I'm sure with enough Googling you'll be able to find it. But right now, without further ado, let me press play on tape and we'll watch Angel's Egg.
How are you?
Wow. I really liked this. This was a really, really good movie. It's very short, only 70 minutes or something like that, but it is captivating. There's almost no dialogue at all. Beautiful drawing and animation and open to interpretation, which really just ticks all the boxes for me. It reminded me somewhat of that French animated movie from 1970 something, Fantastic Planet. Just in the sense of like the atmosphere that it creates, I suppose. But let me give you a quick run through. I'll just do the first 10 minutes because it is such a short film. So the film opens with we're just staring down at two human hands clasped together on a black background, and they sort of move around and then open, palms facing upwards, and the palms are free of any mark or anything like that. Of course, later on we'll see a character that has their palms bandaged up, a Christ-like figure perhaps, but then one of the fists clenches and we hear bones crack, and then we cut to this image of a chick, some baby bird or baby flying creature in a transparent egg, which is held aloft by a tree of some sort. It's a bit reminiscent of the arm in Twin Peaks, The Return. You remember the tree with the brain on top? It kind of is reminiscent of that image. And there's all of this dramatic choral music like the end of 2001: A Space Odyssey and movies like that, like very dramatic. And then we hear a faint heartbeat and we see the eye of the chick twitch in close-up. And then we cut to a close-up of a young man with white hair and some sort of sword or gun or weapon that's sort of shaped like a crucifix slung over his shoulder, but a high-tech version of a crucifix. It's all metal and buttons and lights and all sorts of things like that. and he's standing in front of some sort of a machine. And on a zoom out, it looks like a bunch of satellite dishes, maybe listening to the heavens, and the sky itself is blood red. But then from the sky descends this massive spiky metal orb that looks like an eye, with statues of people covering it. And these people look like Romans or something like that, or soldiers perhaps, but they are barefooted and dressed in robes and so forth. And then a whole bunch of alarms go off, and this big spiky orb touches down onto the earth. And then we get our first line of dialogue. Who are you? You know, talking about this white-haired man with the crucifix over his shoulder. Now, it looks like some of these statue people may have been brought to the ground once the orb landed, but we now cut to a young girl waking up, and she's in a bed underground by the looks of it. She's at the bottom of an observatory, perhaps, of some sort, that has fallen into ruin. It looks like this is a post-apocalyptic world. And she has an egg in the bed with her, which she carries under her dress and makes it look as if she's pregnant. And then we get, at the 5-minute mark, we get the title of the film, and there's a little sequence of different images of this young girl carrying her egg over the titles, the credits of the other people involved. And of course, I said before that it was written and directed by the same person that did Ghost in the Shell in 1995, 10 years later. Now, so this is 5 minutes, and we've set up the 3 main characters in this story. So the young girl, this white-haired man, this Christ-like figure with the crucifix and the palms bound up with bandages or something, and then the egg itself and the chick inside of it, whatever that might be. Angel's egg may give you a clue, but of course, like I said, it's open to interpretation. We see this young girl after the credits drinking from a stream using glass containers, while a solitary white feather floats by in the river water. And it goes on from there. Lots of fascinating images. All sorts of interpretations are possible. Is it about religion? Is it about war? Is it about nuclear weapons or whatever? Technology, nature versus civilization, all sorts of things. It would make for an interesting post-movie coffee shop discussion for sure. Now, this was released in Australia a couple of years afterwards, edited into another movie called In the Aftermath, which doesn't get very good reviews. And the director, Mamoru Oshii himself, stated that he does not know what this movie is about. So it is completely open to interpretation. He also said that it damaged his career, or basically delayed his career, because he found it hard to get a gig after releasing this movie. But I tell you what, this is a 5-star Mintox movie for me. It's a movie I'll go back and rewatch more than once, I think. I'm glad I discovered it as part of doing this podcast. I'm surprised I haven't seen it already, and I hope that listeners out there will give it a go. It is only 70 minutes, like I said. So get yourself into the right mood for some art house cinema and sit down and interpret Angel's Egg. But now,
I'm driving along and I'm just singing my song. I'm in a news-free zone.
well, welcome to the News Free Zone, everybody. It's that time of the podcast where we look back at the news from this week in the year 1985, so that we don't have to worry about the news in 2025. So let's have a look. So this week, the French carried out an underground nuclear bomb test at Mururoa Atoll in French Polynesia. Bit of an angel's egg from the French. This didn't thrill Australia and New Zealand, of course. It was the middle of the Cold War, and France was still using the South Pacific as its radioactive playground. So Greenpeace was watching closely. That would lead up to the infamous Rainbow Warrior incident in New Zealand later on this year, 1985. So it did add fire to the global anti-nuclear movement, which is unfortunately still influential today, because in my opinion, we should have had nuclear energy as standard back in the 90s. Anyway, enough said about that. What am I joking? Like, the Liberals campaigned on that. I shouldn't talk about that, should I? So also in Germany, rather than calling May the 8th as a day of German defeat, the German Chancellor labelled it a day of liberation from Nazi tyranny. So that was a nice way of reframing that whole episode of our history as a liberation day in Germany. So this week in 1985, Madonna's Crazy for You hit number 1. And let me see what else was happening in music. Probably not too much else, but we'll get to some other music news later on. Oh, I see that the song about the average age of the American combat soldier in Vietnam, 19, became a chart-topping hit this week in 1985 as well. The Go-Go's broke up. I don't know who the Go-Go's are. They're an all-female rock band. So some people were unhappy about that. There were a few horrible B movies that came out in this week in 1985. One was Rustler's Rhapsody, which was kind of like Blazing Saddles, or a poor man's version of Blazing Saddles. Funny that would be released the week after we watched the very good Western Silverado last week. There was also a movie called Rappin', so a bit of Music 2000 there. Both of them are very cringeworthy. You can watch the trailers for them on YouTube, but like I said, they've both become a bit of a cult classic, and it's funny that you could have gone and seen them on a double bill this week in 1985, perhaps. So in New York this week, the Mafia Commission to try mob bosses in a big public trial was happening in New York. That's kind of interesting. Gave rise to a lot of TV shows and movies, and someone called Rudy Giuliani was one of their prosecuting attorneys. Wonder what happened to that guy. So what else happened? In Bradford, in the UK, a fire engulfed the wooden main stand. I remember seeing that on the news. So a massive tragedy. Many people lost their lives. I think 56 people. So one of the worst disasters in English football history, deeply etched in the collective memory. So what else? There was a shocking bombing in Philadelphia this week in 1985, not from terrorists, from the police. The police deployed a bomb via helicopter on a residential house occupied by the radical group MOVE, or MOVE. The resulting explosion killed 11 people, including 5 children, and destroyed 61 homes. That's right. A city police department in America literally dropped a bomb on a neighborhood, and this horrific incident is often forgotten. So it's something that is worth going back and reminding ourselves about. Dire Straits also released their classic album Brothers in Arms this week in 1985. It's the album that bought us Money for Nothing and the CGI music video that would go on to make MTV history. So one of the first albums to be recorded digitally and marketed primarily on CD, and it was the first CD to sell over 1 million copies. So audiophiles in 1985 were dazzled by crystal clear sound on the CD. So what else? There was a bit of arcade news in 1985. So Commando hit the arcades in this week in 1985, which is quite interesting. And I think that's probably all of the games news worth talking about. And over now to Usenet news. I don't have very much Usenet news this week, but like I say every week, go to olduse.net if you want to read network news from 40 years ago in your browser. Usenet, of course, was 1985's version of Reddit, proto-social media. And speaking of Reddit, Reddit itself turned 20 years old this week. So Reddit started just as close to this week in 1985 as this week in 2025. So over on net.legal on Usenet, I was very interested to see a post by a chap called Fred Fish. So he was talking about free software and basically whether your employer owns the right to work that you do outside of office hours. For example, if you're working at home on a company-supplied computer, would they own the software that you wrote, even if you just wrote it yourself as a hobby? Of course, in many cases, the answer is yes, they would own it. And I know that I've negotiated contracts myself in the past to keep ownership of code that I write while I'm employed by somebody else. But the name Fred Fish sparked a lot of recognition because he would become quite famous for starting the Fred Fish public domain collection of discs for the Commodore Amiga. The discs are numbered well over 1,000. And I remember back in the day, I could go into my local computer store, buy a pack of 10 blank floppy disks, and then look through a big catalogue of Fred Fish discs and write down 10 numbers. You know, I want number 47 and number 131 and number 683, and give it to the chap behind the counter. And for an extra $1, he would copy all 10 of those discs onto the blank set of discs that I bought. So that's what we did before having access to fast networks. It was a good way of getting lots of public domain software, and it was an invaluable collection, very carefully curated with lots of notes written for every disc. There was also an article I read this week about the Grateful Dead's 60th anniversary in 2025. So they were already 20 years old in 1985, which kind of explains why they took over net.music and needed their very own news group, net.music.dead, which I don't read anymore because I'm not really a fan. Jerry Garcia, of course, died in 1995. The Grateful Dead's known as being a bit of a jamming band that really encouraged bootlegging as well, which is probably one of the reasons why they're so long-lived, because there's a lot of bootleg recordings. I know them mostly because John Perry Barlow, who was a founding member of the EFF, the Electronic, what are they called? The Free Software Foundation, EFF, Electronic Frontier Foundation? I can't remember. He wrote for Wired, and he was a big advocate of cyberspace and virtual reality back in the day. He was quite an interesting character, and he really popularized the concept of pronoia, which is the opposite of paranoia. It's kind of the belief that the world is conspiring to make your life better. So that's interesting. But for me, that's all the news from this week in 1985. So that's the end of the podcast. Please tune in again next week, where we'll be spinning the bingo machine and watching another movie from 1985. But until then, please don't forget to rewind.